2022.
Dude, what? Too soon. I think it was too late if you ask me. Thank you to our $5 patron, Sinus Lancelot. And thank you to our other $5 patron, Art Goon. And a big thank you to our $25 patron, the Mr. Greed. Now, before we have this review of Chapter 59 of Record of Ragnarok, please do here leave your own thoughts on the chapter in the comment section down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make sure that little notification bell so you miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 a month. Any support would be appreciated. Now, let's get into it. What's up, guys? I'll the pencil here, and here we are to review Chapter 59 of Record of Ragnarok, which is known as the Greatest King. And to say the very least, it would be a massive, colossal, unbelievable L if Huang lost this fight now. However, let's hop right into it. So we open up, and we do get to see that the king who started it all, he was once the most cursed prince in all of history, which is a very interesting way to open a chapter, right? And I will readily admit, I will very readily admit that I feel like they're going so heavy into Huang that's like, I hope they go heavy into Hades. Like, notably, this entire chapter, it like doesn't even start in the modern time period. Like, we start way back when, and even then the chapter flashbacks even forward from the first page. So like the amount of dedication that we're getting into Huang, it's like we gotta realize every other previous big three brother got like 2 pages of backstory. Meanwhile, we're what? Let's see. We've gotten about like a chapter and a half of Huang's backstory, and I'm not complaining. Notably, the backstory is one of my favorite parts of Record of Ragnarok because they flesh out the characters, and as much as I love the fights, characters are what I really appreciate. And while you can portray character very well through fights, you know, a little extra background development, it never hurts. It never hurts. I'm not complaining. So I'm hoping that Hades gets equal treatment, because notably we're only about like 3.5 chapters deep into the fight, and you could argue a chapter and a half of that hasn't even really been the fight, it's been backstory. But the fight has progressed pretty decently, like both sides have done decent amounts of damage to each other. So I'm wondering, like, how much fight do we have left? How much backstory are we going to get on Hades? Because I really want Hades to get an in-depth backstory. And that may be my biases towards, like, the Hades character that's evolved into the modern day. Like, the one that has showed up in, like, Lore Olympus. The one that shows up in the later Percy Jackson novels. Like, the Hades that's more sympathetic than the ones that are typically portrayed due to his role in Greek mythology and earlier narratives. So that may be my biases there. But at the same time, the series hasn't set a good precedent for giving us the most elaborate backstories on the big three brothers. So I'm kind of worried for Hades. And at the same time, like, I'm leaning heavily towards Huang because I know so much about him. I feel like I know nothing about Hades. So on just an opening note, considering we get what? I don't even think we get a page of him, maybe? Hold on, let me skip all the way to the end of the chapter. Yeah, we get about a page and a half of Hades. So I'm not exactly like the way the mangaka could take this, the writer of the Record of Ragnarok manga. I know there are 2 artists and then the actual writer. The way the writer could take this is build up Huang to be this amazing character, give Hades 2 pages of backstory, and have him win. And I wouldn't like that, just because I would like to see more backstory. Because notably, the past couple, I'd say since probably since the 4th fight onward, we haven't had those like 2-page backstories. Like, let me think. The 3rd fight is the last time we had like, oh, you just get 2 pages and you're done. Like, Poseidon's backstory, as cool as it is, isn't that much. So I would actually like to see an in-depth backstory, because considering we've been getting that mostly for both sides. Heck, the last battle, the 2 backstories were intertwined for the most part. So you could definitely get a lot of leverage out of this. So I'm hoping that we get the Hades' side of the story, because right now, I'll admit, this chapter, like, if I wasn't already sold on Huang winning, which admittedly I was, as much as I love Hades, I would like the humans to take the lead. Like, in the macro sense, I would love the humans to take the lead. But at the same time, like, since I have no context for this version of Hades, I'm just looking over here at Huang with all this character development, all this backstory, all this rich history to him, and I'm like, gosh darn. Hades, I hate to say it, but you're just going to be part of the big 3 L's. Like, come on now. But of course, we get to see, getting back to the chapter itself, we get to see that in the year 260 BC, the Battle of Changping, and essentially upon that year, there was a great battle, and many men were captured, and they were burned alive and buried en masse. Or no, not even that. They were just buried alive en masse. And their number of men buried was 450,000. That's a way to open up the chapter, all right. And the thing is, this is all giving context to the next leader of the country that did attack. And we see that the member of the Qin royal family, Qin Shi Huang, the member of the Qin royal family, he essentially had an affair with a dancer, and this dancer produced a child. And this child was the baby who would become Huang. And notably, the thing about this child is that due to the whole not actual child thing, the more so undercover affair, the king didn't want the child around. So the child was sent off, and the dancer was sent off alone. And we see that in 2 years, he was abandoned by his father. And then apparently that same year, his mother went off to do other things. So he was abandoned by his father and his mother. And we get to see that even his own countrymen just straight up abandoned him because he was an illegitimate child. They already had the bad clout from the entire Great Battle of Changping. Like, overall, Huang's life started horribly. He had no one with him. And due to that, he grew up alone and in suffering. Due to his royal status, he was still given a place to live. He was allowed as a quote-unquote guest of another kingdom. And we get to see his household. And you can see immediately before we even get to see Huang himself or the inside of the house, the front of the house is being guarded by two people who are sitting down and don't seem interested. And the entire house walls are just covered in vandalism. Obviously, the guards didn't stop the people there. And it's because Huang's being held in the kingdom that is taking the brunt of the loss of their men. Like, they had lost the conflict unless their men had died, so of course they're going to hate anything to do with that country, but at the same time they can't do anything to the prince because that could possibly cause another attack. So they'll do everything around that. They'll make him suffer as much as they can. You can see that through the vandalism, and it opens up with, honestly, like, a really, really, really sad tale. And I don't do any research on the Record of Ragnarok fighters, mainly for my own surprise. Like, I like to see what the mangaka does with them, and then I'll maybe go do research after, even though I haven't done that for really anybody. I'm bad. But the thing is, I like to learn stuff like this, because notably, if you had asked me before this chapter, I thought Huang just lived a regular princely life. Like, nothing in his backstory really alluded to the idea that he grew up this way. And you get to see that once he finally returns, even literally as he's returning, people are still painting on the walls. The guards don't care that he's back. And Huang looks miserable. He looks broken, right? Because you see him bowing before these guards, and at the age of 7, his eyes are closed, and he has this very, like, tense smile on his face. He knows he's not in a safe spot. That's why he's being so cordial, but of course he's not comfortable, so he's hiding it. And it's, I don't know, like, it was weird, I guess, because they de-aged him, right? And they gave him this such a sad looking appearance that it felt wrong. Like, this whole chapter opens up with this air of pity for a character that seems so extravagant that we knew. But considering the fact that we don't get to see this character being extravagant at the start of this chapter, it sort of lets you automatically slide into this world even with the knowledge of who Huang turns out to be. And you get to see that Huang is in sort of a hostage situation still, right? He's being held by this kingdom, but it's half because they don't want to instigate another war, and half because he's a hostage. Obviously, holding the crown prince of a kingdom would be pretty useful leverage, even if this crown prince isn't the current crown prince, he has the potential to be. And we see that the guard guarding his house hates that he's guarding it, for one, and two, notes to Huang, like, yo, the moment, if they ever even consider letting you go, I'm going to be the one to kill you. I will bury you alive. And it's crazy that, like, you know, once again, this is what reading narratives does. It allows you to see in the perspective of other people in a way that I never could. Like, notably, because I've never been in a scenario like this guard has been in, like these people have been in, I couldn't imagine harassing a child over something that he literally, like, he wasn't even born. Let's see, was he even, I don't even think he was born at the time of the conflict, right? Like, he was born afterwards, the following year. Yeah, like, literally, the following, oh wait, no. So he was being held hostage. But yeah, literally, he wasn't even born until after the conflict. I couldn't imagine holding a kid liable to that, especially considering he seems to have no connection to that previous life. He doesn't even know anything about it. It's not his fault. But of course, considering these people have no other outlet to take their anger on, you have a living physical embodiment of a nation that you despise in front of you. Maybe you would snap. Maybe you would give into that. And I think it's sad. It's a very sad narrative to tell, but it's something that's realistic. Humans would act like this. And sure, it's dramatized because it's a manga. We're reading a narrative. But at the same time, I like when mangaka and storytellers in general aren't afraid to show like the disgusting side of human nature, especially in a manga that's centered around saving humanity. Who knows? This very guard right here could be in the audience watching Hoang fight for humanity. That's the thing. This is a manga that is about humans fighting for their right to exist, and you see the nastiness and evil within humans. The whole reason why the gods are like, we gotta get them up out of here. Well, obviously there are multiple reasons, but the nasty nature of humanity is one of them. And it's sad to see, but it's honestly still good to see because it's a well-rounded picture, right? Not every human is perfect. Not every human is the best warrior. Not every human is kind. So it's great to see this balance portrayed. And of course, we get to see Hoang as he throbs and is in pain from something. He simply smiles and ignores it. And he thanks them for keeping his home safe. They can't get a rise out of him, essentially. And he walks right on in. And we find out that the guards have likely attempted this routine a lot, right? Because they know that he always smiles and that he's really creepy. And to be fair, for a 7-year-old to have this much self-control, it is quite impressive. I'm not gonna lie. Like I can imagine myself at 7 years old. It's not in this scenario, but I know I would have snapped for less. Like if you, who knows? Maybe if you threatened my life. Maybe I'm not sure if 7-year-old Pencil was smart enough to cognitively understand the difference between life and death at that point. So who knows? Maybe I wouldn't have been able to hold. Maybe I would have been able to hold my tongue. But knowing me, I probably wouldn't. And of course, we get to see that he's just a living hostage, right? Like they let him live in his own house on his own estate, but he's just there as a victim. And of course, as he walks in, there's someone new that he's never seen there before. And notably, this is the first time in the chapter that we see him open his eyes, and it's in shock and confusion. And we get to see that he gets a question. The lady sitting there asks, "Are you Yin Zhang?" And of course, he answers, yes. He closes his eyes and he smiles. And this woman, I'm sorry. This woman, she is kind of shocked to see that the Yin Zhang that is being bullied and tortured by the entire town is pretty young, like straight up 7 years old. And of course, Yin Zhang asks a pretty reasonable question. Like, once again, 7-year-old cognitive. I don't know. I had stranger danger training at that time, but he straight up asks, excuse me, pardon me. I mean, they call me rude, but what are you doing in my home? And like, it's a reasonable question to ask. I'm not gonna lie. I'd probably ask if some random person appeared in my home. But then again, he has no caretakers. Assumingly, he took care of himself up to this point. Like, we see he's out running errands by himself for himself. He's living in this estate alone. And now this lady is just here. Though it's implied later on in the chapter that hypothetically he had previous people. It's just that they wouldn't take care of him properly, or they didn't want to take care of him, so they left. So maybe this position has been filled before. It's just that it hadn't been filled for a while. So now he's wondering what she's doing here. And she introduces herself as Chunyan, his new live-in caretaker and bodyguard. And you can tell that she's built for fighting just because of the scars on her body. She's obviously in shape. She's prepared to do all the bodyguarding things. Of course, in a nation where you're hated, I wouldn't be surprised if people took pot shots at Yin at this point because of how vulnerable he is. He's a 7-year-old. And of course, accidentally getting run over by a character or something. Oh no, the prince is dead. What a shame. Like, obviously he needs a little bit of extra protection. Which makes me wonder, like, 7 years, that's a long time. Like, I get it, he's being held hostage, and the person who would likely get Hoang up out of here would probably not be in the best of spots afterwards, but I'm shocked not a single person in 7 years has come and gotten this man. Well, gotten this child. See, that's the thing. Like, this isn't even Hoang. His name is Ying Shang. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce names, but This is way before he has any status. So he is still just a kid here, and it's kind of crazy. And of course, we get to see Chongyang testing Huang, like, hey, since I'm your living caretaker, since this is my responsibility now, I can roll you, fold you, or do whatever I want. Please do whatever you want to make. And now, can I make these? See, I keep pushing the boundaries. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to make these jokes, but please. And we get to see that Huang, even upon the threat of physical harm, he just smiles and he's like, oh, okay, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for guarding me. And she's kind of disconcerted and impressed, or like, is disconcerted the word? No, disconcerted, I believe. She's shocked, right? Like, she is surprised that a 7-year-old is this polite, and now she just commands him to, like, well, show me around the place, because obviously the first taunt didn't work. And we get to see that she's blown away by how much of a dump this is. Like, obviously, considering it's a 7-year-old, he's not going to be able to reach all the tall crevices and stuff like that. He's not going to be too concerned about cleaning or cleanliness, considering he's barely scraping by. And it makes sense. According to her, it even makes sense, because this is a reject of the Qin royal family. Like mentioned earlier, Huang isn't next in line for the throne or anything. He just has royal blood. So if anything were to happen to the current royal, or anything were to happen to the current royal line, succession would naturally fall to him. So they want to keep him alive, but alive is the term. They aren't going to let him live lavish or anything like that. And I like how Huang, well, I don't like it, but it's once again goes to show how deeply this subservient and servant-like attitude has been built into Wang's head, because he doesn't even respond to any of her jabs. He's just like, oh, okay. Would you like something to drink? If water is all right, I'll go fetch some. Like, he's so subdued. And I can definitely tell his much more bombastic, free-walking, wandering personality comes from a byproduct of living like this. For so long, he had to suppress himself. So that childish glee and nature of exploring and the ability to express his strength, all of that he does later in life comes from all the life he had to live so far. And I think it's cool to see that dichotomy. It's cool to see where some parts of someone's personality comes from in their childhood, because you can tell that Huang is suppressing himself. So obviously years upon years of suppression is going to lead to years upon years of non-suppression when he doesn't have to anymore. And of course, we get to see that Chunyan is like, yeah, something's just off about you. Like, she doesn't believe that he's 7. And she's shocked that a kid his age is like not crying at everything, has been throwing no fits, has just been smiling ear to ear. It's just weird. And once again, to be fair, picture yourself at 7. How much self-control did you have at age 7? How old were you at age 7? At least in the American system, I believe that's 2nd grade. Because 5-year-old's kindergarten, 6-year-old is 1st grade. Yeah, so picture 2nd grade you, and people were threatening your life. How much self-composure are you going to have? When people are insulting you at age 7? How much self-control? So it does goes to show, once again, the deep nature of how intertwined this life of subservience has gotten to him. And it's amazing to see, right? Even though the mangaka is pointing it out narratively, what he's not pointing out narratively, or no, he's not pointing out through dialogue, is the idea that Huang is forced to live this way. Like, you have to infer that based on what we've seen so far, how people treat him in this land, that it would not be safe for him to act in other ways. You have to pick that up. You have to essentially tear that out of the narrative. And I like that. I like when mangaka will put in a subtext that's pretty obvious, but isn't directly told to you, so you feel like, I feel smart. I feel like I'm extrapolating something, even though the mangaka has laid it out pretty bare. And I think that's really nice. It's good. It's good. I appreciate that. I'm not the sharpest spoon in the kitchen shed, so any basic subtext I can get out, I greatly appreciate. And of course, we see that like it's crazy, right? Like, Huang, upon realizing that he's not being the ideal 7-year-old, he begins to fake throw a tantrum. Like, he curls his fist and starts swinging around, and it's because it's all he knows, right? Like, he has any childish nature that he's had has been so deeply repressed that he doesn't know how to throw a tantrum, because he knows throwing a tantrum would likely end up with him getting beaten. with him not being able to eat, with him not being able to drink, with him ending up dead. Who knows what could happen if he ever were to show a lick of emotion. It's better to be interpreted as that creepy kid who always smiles and goes around and does what everyone says, rather than being anything else, because anything else is a risk. It's a detriment to your life. So naturally, Hoang is going to adopt this whole ideology and lifestyle of suppress, hold back, don't care, don't show. And I don't know, I feel bad saying it's really cool to see, but shoot, it's really cool to see. You know, I won't knock it. And we get to see that Hoang, when being questioned on if he's mocking Chunyan or Chunyang, Chunyan, I think it's Yang because it's not a G on the end. But when he's asked if he's mocking her, he says no, not at all. Like, and notably, his already shaky speech bubbles become even more shaky, right? Like because he's afraid of repercussion, he's afraid of harm because of that. And Chunyang essentially lets it slide and goes out into the world. And she explains that when she goes to leave, she's like, "Yo, we're cleaning this place up. We're gonna make this a place to live in." And the two work together, and they go together and live, as the chapter calls it, a pseudo-familial life, like mom and son, essentially. They live together. And we get to see that while their house life may be somewhat normal, pseudo-familial, the outside world isn't going to suddenly change about Hoang, because they've been living with this lifestyle with him for so long. So while everyone is happy and normal, living life in the marketplace, she sees that all these people are living, and she spots this dude making something, right? And she sees Hoang staring hungrily at it, and of course she's like, "Fine, if you want to have some, just tell me." And I love, like, you can tell that already, due to what Hoang has shown her, like the sad little repressed kid in him, she's already softened up to him in a sense, like drastically compared to before, just because of the first impression he made. So she's willing to get him this extra stuff. And so but the thing is, when she goes to ask for the two, manto and some grilled meat, the guy is happy and serving her. He's like, "Wow, you're amazing, you're beautiful, you sure you're gonna want to eat all that by yourself? You may ruin the figure. I'm just talking about you. Hey, shoot, you need a man. I got grilled meat, and then I got that raw meat I can give you in the bag. You know what I'm saying?" But then he notices Hoang is there, and his expression shifts from this jovial, happy, laughing guy to a face of first confusion, then shock, then anger. And then he grabs the moto. What I'm assuming is the moto. I don't think that's the grilled meat. He grabs it, and then he throws it on the ground. And naturally, Chunyan, not expecting that, wondering like what the heck happened, she goes to grab him and make him pay repercussions for throwing the food on the ground. But you can tell, like, it is amazing, right? I don't know. It's because it's kids, right? Like, it's so easy to make me feel connected and feel bad for kid characters than it is to make me feel bad for adult characters. Like, normally I wouldn't be caring as much. Like, if you can check out any of the other reviews on my channel or any of the story analysis, it gets hard for me to care very quickly. I'm not one to give in. But the image of seeing Hoang pick up the food off the ground while thanking the man and just patting off some dirt and eating it and saying it's delicious. Like, it's just sad. Like, it feels wrong, right? And I know, this is a weird thing where I can understand the human nature of, like, oh, you hate this symbol of oppression that you guys went through, so of course you're going to torture it. Like, it's weird to say, of course, because personally, I at least I think my current moral compass would assume that I wouldn't do that to a child that has nothing to do with the tragedy that I suffered. But at the same time, who knows? So I can get why the people of this kingdom are treating him like this, but at the same time, it's so sad to see, like, a child suffer this way. And even Chunyan is like, what the heck? Like, I guess she's new to this area, right? So she's never seen this before. She's never seen it in action. So of course she's just confused looking at how he just eats like this. And we see that due to this whole loud interaction, everyone finally noticed who it is, and they recognize it's the prince from Kin who's being held hostage. And you see a live manifestation of all the hatred, because the people have lost sons, they lost little brothers, they've lost fathers, everybody. They've lost everyone because of the nation that Hwang essentially represents. And you see Hwang open his eyes. But the thing is, when he does, you see all of this essential malice fuel out of it. Literally, ironically enough, I make so many video game references, but this looks like the malice from Breath of the Wild. If you remember the Calamity, all of the malice that Ganon had tended to spawn eyes. And of course, since eyes are the windows to the soul, the Kin's soul is essentially bared the moment he opened his eyes, so he sees all the hatred from the glares he's getting. And we see the hate, the curses, the kill, the resentment, the yell, the hatred, everything, all the negativity, and it flows into him. But Hwang, as he once again throbs in pain, like, a reread of this chapter hits different, because you take extra deep notice of everything on a reread once you have full story context. But you get to see that he suppresses it all with a grin, then he closes his eyes to try and block out the negativity, and he simply picks himself back up and walks away. And Chunyan is just shocked, right? Like, she doesn't do anything, because notably, she knows she's not going to win against an entire town, but at the same time, she goes back and she's like, sitting there. She's just not even saying a word. She's looking at her little, what is it? Is it a wind catcher? I know a dream catcher is something different, but it's one of those roly, spinny wind Hold on a second. I need to look that up. Pinwheel. It's called a pinwheel. You learn something new every day. I think I knew that. I knew that. It's just I haven't said it in such a long time. But as Hwang thanks her for the food, as she's just rattling her pinwheel, he's like, well, feeling a little tired, so if you excuse me, I'm going to go lie down. And Hwang just looks at him, right? And notably, she sees something popping out of his clothes, his garb. And she immediately lunges and grabs him, saying, hold it. And she checks, and she sees all these things like coating his body. And it's seemingly, once again, I'm saying that young corruption from Breath of the Wild. Obviously, we see that Hwang is a worshiper of Calamity Ganon. He's part of the Yiga clan, not the king royal family. I'm sorry, but he's covered in these negative marks. And we get to see that these marks are sizzling. And these are essentially what all the throbbing has been whenever he's faced negativity. Every time he's throbbed, these marks are what are seething and writhing and growing on him, and possibly steaming beneath his clothes. And notably, Chunyan is like, whoa, what the heck happened? Like, are you okay? Like, did the people in town do this to you? Why did you never tell me about this? And we see that Hwang, as he explains, whenever he sees someone's pain, he sees someone get injured, it reflects towards me. He starts to get scars on his body. And this is apparently a phenomenon known as mirror touch one second, Google save me. Mirror touch synesthesia. Essentially the phenomenon where another person touches their cheek and the subject looking upon the person feels their own cheek being touched. It's like, notably, I don't think I have major cases of this, but I've like looked at things and cringed because I've seen it. Like, I saw, like, whenever I see one of those videos of someone like putting too much weight on the bar and their leg goes the wrong way, like my knee hurts. Like that, it's like my body pseudo picturing like, hey, what would that be like? But essentially, Hwang has that to an extreme degree, and notably, it's the reason I say an extreme degree is because it's kind of suppressed. It's like it's essentially your brain tricking you, because the brain essentially perceives images and like your body tries to understand it. But with Hwang, one day as he watched two men fight, he saw one cut the other. And in the case of Yin Zhang, the future king of Qin, he sees that he notices that the wounds that he sees on others immediately get reflected onto himself. So his body essentially is self-destroying. And like, and the thing is, like, I guess I'm leaping ahead in the narrative, but this chapter never explains how he got the star power. Like, it just never does. So I wonder, like, are we gonna get another piece of backstory for that? Like, how does he get the ability to see stars and weak points? But we see that all the damage he saw will become his own. But on top of that, because of how much negativity he's experienced, he's essentially become a conduit for hatred. So even if he's not getting harmed, even if no one else around him is getting harmed, all the negativity essentially develops into wounds on his body. So even if he's, just living life, doing him, vibing, if he is insulted or he feels hatred, despise, resentment, if he feels any of that, he did his own surpassing of human limits. And I'm not gonna lie, I thought Jack's power was kind of whack because I figured it was essentially combat non-viable. Raiden was pretty whack too because he essentially had to recreate his own muscular vascular system. But when you have people like Sasuke, you got people like Adam, you have people like Lubu. How come everyone had drawbacks, right? Lubu, godly body, he didn't have the same constitution and simple durability as a god. Okay, not a downside necessarily. That's just limits. Adam, oh no, he could overheat because he was literally fighting back against hundreds, if not thousands, of beyond time level punches. Okay, not that bad of a weakness. You have someone like Sasuke, he could see defense. He could picture the defense patterns of someone by perceiving their ability. Sure, it took a lot of time to train to get that, but not that bad of a drawback. Oh, he can't react to everything because he needs to adapt his own abilities. Sure, once again, not that bad of a drawback. You had someone like Jack, he can see the emotions of people. Sure, may have been a reason why he went nuts, but still, overall, you give that to your average individual, and they may not do much with it. It's not gonna. There are no decisive drawbacks, and even then, look at Raiden. Raiden, sure, he had to reconstruct his entire muscular vascular system. Once he did, he was the strongest dude ever. Well, at least in his time period. Who knows? Raiden versus Lubu, that's a fight for another day. But he was the strongest dude ever and just chilled and existed as the strongest dude ever once he reconstructed his muscular vascular system. Other than that, he was fine. We didn't have any humans. Buddha didn't necessarily have anything. Sure. Oh no, if you have a purely dark soul, he can't predict your movements. Sucks to suck. But Huang literally has self-harm. Self-harm that he can't control. Huang essentially cannot use his eyes properly. That is a whole battle sense down. And sure, it probably amps your other senses. Once Huang got used to being blindfolded, he probably can hear better, probably can smell better, all of that stuff. But at the same time, that is such a horrible drawback to such little benefit. An experienced fighter can tell where your weak points are going to be. A good enough fighter is oh, I know, I'll strike for his neck. Oh, I know, I'll strike for his joints. You can learn that. Even the star ability he develops later in life, it just doesn't seem that viable considering the extreme drawbacks. And of course, we get to see that even though all this hatred manifests on him, even though he's suffering so much, when Chunyan is wait, no, you are suffering. She's no, don't worry. Huang's no, don't worry. It's just a little pain. And if I give him enough time, the wounds will heal. And of course, as he redresses himself, he collapses from the pain. And we see that essentially all this negativity has racked his body so horribly that he has hit a limit. And just like anybody else who hits the limit, he drops. Legitimately, he falls and almost slams headfirst against the floor. But Chunyang help me. She catches him and she's whoa, you can barely even stand. Chill. And she literally asks the question, why hide all that? And we get verbalized what was implied, the idea that he deserves this punishment. This pain is all something he deserves because of what his family did to him. And we see that the smile he constantly wears is not only a defense mechanism against the people around him, but it's also a cover-up for all the pain he hides within his heart. And he smiles with the hopes of one day that they will forgive him. And as the chapter describes it, it is the most pitiful of armor. And jeez, I mean, that's wishful thinking, I guess. See, there you go. There's that 7-year-old optimism. That's the only thing he's got. Because if they're treating you like this now, I can't imagine what they treat you like if you were an adult. Come on now. I don't know what you expect. But of course, he still has hope, right? Because if he didn't have hope, I doubt we'd have the greatest emperor of all China if he gave up hope. So I definitely put respect on his name for putting himself through that, especially considering this is his only choice. This is the only way he could survive. So I put respect on his name for being able to do it so long. But obviously Chunyan is what the heck? And we see that she just questions him, like, how can you keep smiling like that when you know it's false? Why don't you get angry? Why don't you hate them? Like, what's going on here? And obviously he's surprised, like, wait, what you mean? And what Chunyang says is that what happened at Changping has nothing to do with you. It's not right that you're getting hurt, so please stop acting like the punching bag for all these people. Let yourself emote, let yourself live life, and stop dying internally. And we see that and it's amazing, right? Because in your typical show or like narrative, just to keep the story going, he would have just accepted it right there and there. That loud yelling proclamation, like, free yourself, be your own man. But you see, just because of how much he's been through, he still hides it. He still tries to suppress. His voice shakes as he's trying to say, no, I'm a cursed child. I deserve it. And she yanks him into a hug. Probably the only act of affection he's ever felt in his life. And Chunyang goes on to explain, it doesn't matter how awful your parents are. Their kid doesn't deserve to be punished. And we see for the first time, really, this entire chapter, outside of genuine surprise, Huang seems to be shaking, right? He's like, what is going on? And of course, we see that Chunyang views his wounds as proof of a kind person that's willing to understand others, not the mark of a cursed child. And it's not the yelling, it's not the declaration you need to live for yourself, it's the soft admittance that you can live however you want to live, comboed with embrace that he's probably never felt ever in his life, that finally breaks him. And he breaks out into tears, and he's crying while holding on to his adoptive mother. And she's so proud to see him cry, so proud to see him emote. And he finally lets it all out. Years upon years of repressed emotions. Now he's finally in a safe space, finally with someone he can trust. He just lets it all out. And he literally cries through the night. Now, allow me to stop my synopsis and once again go back to Hades and hope, because like the thing is, you could mirror this very, very well. All you have to do, see, the only issue is, right, that's the thing, they redid the Titanomachy. Like, according to Record of Ragnarok lore, the Titanomachy only happened because Zeus held a tournament. That's not how it happened originally. So I wonder, did Kronos even eat Hades? I don't know. Like, Kronos doesn't even seem big enough to eat his kids in this timeline. So I'm not exactly sure they could mirror it, but if we were going by traditional Greek logic, you could literally have the exact same thing. Actually, even you could still do this. You could still very easily do this. You would just have to, like, make it so that Hades and the brothers were, like, kept in. But even then, that doesn't make sense. Because we saw what Poseidon's life growing up was like. Man, this is rough. But of course, we cut back to Huang, and he wakes up the next morning after the first time in his life he let his feelings show, and he cried himself up a storm so much that Chunyang had to put him in bed. And we see for the first time ever, he's smiling genuinely. Like, it's not that face fork one, that forced fake one he's had for so long, but it's actually like a genuine, nervous, excited smile as he scratches his head. And we see that she made him his famous headband. And of course, she's like, when he asks, wait, why'd you make this for me? She goes on to explain, well, as long as you can cover your eyes, then maybe you won't have to experience the pain that you see in other people. Maybe that'll help you. And he's impressed that, one, she even thought of it that way, but two, that she made this for him. Like, she didn't know he could do that. And she admits, she gets a little hint, and that's what I like about chapters on a reread. You can pick up so many little things, and I think that's great. But she says, that used to be a piece of cake for me. Now go ahead and try it on. And of course, he wraps the blindfold over his head, and I like how you can tell it's different from when he's older. Like, he got bigger because the stripe design takes over a much larger portion of his face in comparison to before. So he's so tiny that when he covers, he's completely blind. Like, well, not completely blind, he can still see to a degree, but he promises that he's going to take care of it. And that's the first time he ever said the word how, which I'm assuming is like kin dialect. That's why she recognizes it as something different. And we see that through this, after he got the blindfold, these two truly became like a mother and son, right? They spent all their time together, and Chunyang was the only person in his entire life that Huang could feel no pain around. That's beautiful and that's great. And you see that throughout time, throughout this montage, they get their life together. They start fixing up the castle. They start washing down all the paint. They start to train together. They begin to mess with the people of the town. Like, they're overall having a good time together as individuals. And I've read enough manga to know where this is. Not even enough manga. I've read enough stories to know where this is going, right? But the thing is, it's not, like, I will admit, the story catches you because it dedicates so much time. And you see these two being happy together. Huang finally being happy, being truly happy. But then, the unexpected happens. We get to see that out of nowhere, the emperor has died. And I wonder, let's see, King and his son passed away, abandoned Zhang and ascended to the throne, and thus, okay. So I wonder what caused that. Like 2 years later, it's a very specific interval of time. So Huang is now 7, and apparently, so in 2050 BC, the man who abandoned Ying Zhang and fled to Zhao Zhiqiu ascended the throne, and thus Ying Zhang unexpectedly became crown prince, first line to the throne, and was permitted to return to Qin. So essentially, I'm not sure if that's his dad. Who is that? I am admittedly a little confused by this. King Zhang of Qin and his son Zhao Wen passed up. So it's a cousin, I guess. It's a related individual. And I don't think, maybe the first guy wasn't an emperor, but these guys are essentially of royal blood. So now that he's in line, Zhang automatically, as the only heir, or the only son, I suppose, becomes the next heir to the kingdom. So they come and pick him up. And we get to see that now that he's permitted to return to Qin, he decides to return. And I do think that's healthy. Admittedly, part of me, when I first read the chapter, wondered, well, shit, if you're enjoying your life in wherever so much, you might as well just tell them to buzz off and just keep living life with your mom. Like, it doesn't seem like a healthy place to return to if they abandon you like this. For them to suddenly want you back, I mean, maybe, well, that would probably just cause problems. Because like, if he denied, they would assume he's being coerced, and it would have caused another Changping incident. So I definitely get why he decided to go back. Once again, it's his kindness, and I think that's great. Even if it took a second for me to figure that out, but still, I think it's cool. And of course, we see that as they're going up the mountain, the rider playfully declares, like, hey, we're almost there. We're almost at the Qin border. And of course, we see the mother and son duo, and obviously Huang isn't happy that he's got to say goodbye to his mom, right? Because his mom is unfortunately a citizen of not Qin. She's a citizen of the other kingdom. So she says that, hey, it's fine. You know, these last 2 years, they were very fun. My job only lasts to the border. It'll be cool. And of course, being desperate, because this is the only person, like the chapter itself says, and what we can see, this is the only person that Huang has actually felt happy around. He doesn't know anybody back home. Like, legitimately, he was abandoned as a baby. So he has no idea of any of the people back there. So he's like, wait, please, can you come with me? And obviously the guard is a little bit perturbed by that. But Chunyan declines, is like, hey, I'm a citizen of Zhao. Admiral Zhao? Is that an avatar? No, I'm kidding. But she essentially says, I can't really follow you. It's too late for me to try to become a citizen of Qin. And obviously, she very likely doesn't speak the language. So there are a lot of roadblocks there. So as Huang gets sad, she tries to cheer him up. But of course, tragedy strikes. And tragedy comes in the form of an assault. And notably, like, these guys do not have stormtrooper aim. Like, they snipe. Like, everyone falls except for the one person with actual trained reflexes that manages to guard Huang. Like, the guard with them drops. The guy riding the carriage drops. Like, everyone's gone. The horse goes nuts and runs and leaves. And that leaves, obviously, the people who attacked. And we see that, I wonder, are these the same two people? Because essentially 2 warriors go to defend Huang, but they immediately get struck down because obviously the other 2 guys are riding on horseback and they're on ground. So even if they have swords out, horses are pretty too strong for that. And we see that obviously they don't care that this is a crown prince of Qin. They're going to attack him right here, right now. And we see that people the reason they're here is to take their anger out on him. And I wish, to be fair, who knows, it may be that guy from the beginning, but I think a missed detail or a missed chance here would have been to have that guy from the start of the chapter be one of like the leading members of this platoon to come take care of Huang. And who knows, it may be, I may just not recognize him, but I think it's kind of a missed opportunity there. And of course, this makes me wonder, I mean, I guess, considering he was an honored guest and now he's not anymore, they're willing to kill him, but you had all this time. Like, how'd you let him get this far? Like, legitimately, if you want to stop him in your town. I don't know, I wouldn't let him go as far as he did. And we get to see that Huang is looking at all the bodies, and shockingly enough, like, is it because they're dead? Like, why does he not spawn with the wounds? I mean, like, this, he should die. Well, actually, we see him start to throb again, meaning that they are taking effect. But so, maybe he can't mirror deadly wounds? Maybe because he has the pain, but he's not actually, like, staggering. In fact, he takes his blindfold all the way off and decides to fight them. But the thing is, she sees that and knocks out. She future trunkses him, essentially. This is Gohan in future trunks. She's like, hey, man, that's a sweet sentiment, but not today. And she knocks him out, and all the warriors of Zao are looking like, don't think he's into that, but we are going to judge you. And she essentially declares that, hey, being your bodyguard is my job. This is my role to protect you, and I'm gonna get rid of them. And of course, the people of Zao are like, well, it'd be like that when it be like that sometimes. I guess we'll just have to get rid of you first. But the thing is, Chun Yun is still extremely well trained, because she, like, to be fair, the guy got off horseback, so it's not one of the horseback dudes, but she still, like, casually kicks the jaw off of one of them. Well, not off, but she kicks him so hard that he immediately drops, and then she manages to dodge a sword swing, and then she actually straight up dodges a stab to the back, whirls around it, and then proceeds to, I think, break the knee, or maybe not break, but, like, stagger the dude so hard that he collapses into an elbow. And of course, Huang is like, what is going on? Why are you doing this for me? And notably, we see that despite how combat ready she is, no one has eyes on the back of their head. So a dude literally runs her through, blade and all, just, and Huang sees it. And once again, his body, I mean, let me see, hold on, let me go back to the last chapter. So, I mean, it's not as graphic as a whole, so maybe it is just the markings again, but considering he just saw her get run through, this is a person he actually cares about, shouldn't he immediately just, like, feel a searing hole in his stomach? I mean, it took a while for the wound to catch up to him in the last chapter, too, but still, like, I'm kind of confused why his whole sensory thing isn't kicking in here. And we see that she, with the sword in her, by the way, manages to push the dude back so hard she literally cracks his neck, because she's from Zao. And of course, these things don't work out too well, because while she got the one dude, who was it? Was it Soifan who said, hey, if I'm dying, make sure you don't waste my death. Make sure you attack the enemy, even through my dying body. And of course, the other dude comes in with his sword, and she can't react in time, so she literally gets bisected. But once again, he's witnessing all this. He's not feeling any pain, or at least, like, I don't even see the throb anymore. So who knows? Maybe the extreme pain mirroring only came once. No, but wait a minute. Let me. I know I'm doing so much detective work in this chapter, but yeah, the last time he saw a wound, it just instantly popped up on him, like an actual, like, sword slice. Like, the dude got it cut on his wrist, and he got a cut on his arm right after. So I don't know what the delay time is. Maybe it's the adrenaline. Maybe he is actually getting those cuts, but he's just not feeling them because adrenaline and stuff. And of course, the dude stands over her dead body and is like, well, it's been real and it's been fun, but Prince of Kin, your time is done. Die now. And of course, not now, not anytime, because from behind he gets his, and like that is some grip strength on the verge of death. Like, she's straight. She grabs him by the top, grabs him by the bottom, and then puts his head on a spin cycle. Like, it doesn't come off, but golly, it snaps his neck. And of course, she's like, hey, you gotta stay away from my kid, because that's what mama do. And of course, she's taking so much damage, right? Like, she's literally just on the verge of death. And notably, once again, I don't know, maybe because I'm sorry, this chapter was such a solid narrative up to this point that was very, very consistent, that I'm kind of shocked that we're breaking this rule so consistently without any explanation. But of course, going back into the narrative, he's like begging her to stay alive, because obviously this is the only person he's ever loved, this is the only person he's ever trusted, so he doesn't want her to die. And we just see her staring up at the stars, and she's like, wow, my fault. I think I did a little too much damage. And of course, Huang's only question is like, why would you do that for me? Like, what reason, what compelled you to make such a foolish decision on my part? What happened? And we see that Chun Yan has been keeping a secret from Huang, and it's the idea that she once had a child that was named Chun. I'm not sure how to say his name, I'm sorry. She had a child in the past, but due to the fact that the incident of Changping happened, he died. He was buried alive. And due to that, she lost him. She lost everything. She didn't have a husband anymore because he had gone off to war. And her child had been captured and put in the whole holding with all the captured soldiers. So they were all buried alive. And we see that she went into a depressive episode. She started to hate living because she was all alone. She cursed the kin because of what they had done to her and her family. So when she had heard the idea that they were essentially looking for someone to take care of him, she wanted to see what that prince would be like, because she didn't have any idea of how old he was. She didn't know anything about him other than the fact that, oh, the Prince of Kin needs a caretaker. And she wanted to see what expression he would have, and who knows, if she didn't like it, she'd give him a piece of his mind and probably kill him. But still, that's different. And she essentially admits that she was just like the people in the town at first. She just had this preconceived notion of all people of kin, and especially their prince. And Huang essentially shattered that notion the moment they met. And of course, she lived with him for 2 years. They spent so much time together, and she stopped caring about that. She started to see him as her own son because of how kind he was. And of course, she's like, hey, I know for a fact if someone like you became king, then maybe you could shift this world that we live in, and maybe you could change it and save them like you saved me. And once again, never usually one to give in to, like, because I predicted it, right? Like, everyone who's ever read a story ever knew that she was gonna die. Like, this is it. But I think it's just because of how well the narrative was sold and how much I was hoping against the inevitable. Essentially, this actually got to me. I didn't shed a tear. You didn't catch me there. You almost got. Nah, not even. I didn't really shed a tear, but I actually legitimately felt bad for both Zhang, as he's called now, and Chun Yang, because their story is literally just a tragedy, like all around pure tragedy. And she leaves him with one final request: to become the greatest king of them all. And of course, he promises that no, I will, but please stay with me, don't leave me. And of course, she's so far gone that she barely even hears him. She's just telling him, hey, don't suppress yourself. Be willing to cry. Be willing to feel emotional. Be willing to feel everything. And in a blink, as she's on the verge of death, as she walks towards the afterlife, she sees the image of her son, or her son to be, or who would have been, and she smiles as she goes, and she dies with one last declaration of love. She wants to get a good look at his face, and obviously, through the tears and the pain, he finally calls her Mama. And she ends it off with his signature word, how. And then her hand slips from his grasp, and she dies. And I ain't gonna lie, that's smack. That is how you tell a story in one chapter. Like, now I gotta remake the backstories ranking, because like I'm not even sure where it's high. It's extremely high, and of course I'm not even technically done with it. But like, two completely different kinds of backstories, two completely different kinds of context, and Huang he stole both contexts. He got the battle backstory, the cool battle backstory, and he got the emotional one. How is someone supposed to compete? Well, I know how someone is supposed to compete. Shiva's knocking on my door right now, being like, "Hey, I'm supposed to compete." But still, man, that was amazing. I'm definitely gonna reread the chapter like at least 3 more times. I'm not gonna lie to you. But of course, we get to see that after the death of Chunyan, he managed to arrive at Qin safely, and then following the death of the current king, he takes over, and we get to see the start of the chapter once again, where we see him holding the band that was made for him, and he asks her to watch over him as he blinds himself once again, and he decides from that point on to walk the path of an emperor together with her. And of course, he became Qin Shi Huang after he had slain Shi Yo 25 years later, and became the emperor that united them all. And he sits there holding his eye, and like, that hurts. The end of last chapter, essentially. And Hades, who admittedly looks very, very weird, like, I can say the very least, I can tell that there are 2 mangaka, or no, there are 2 artists for Record of Ragnarok. And that's no offense to the other artists. Once again, I say this whenever I critique manga art, but I am nowhere near to the level of manga artists that I aspire. Like, there's some manga out there that look at them just like, ew. But I still will admit that I'm not to that level. I cannot autonomously create my own manga week by week, month by month. You give me a year and I probably still can't create my own manga to anywhere near the degree of any publishing mangaka. However, I still feel like I'm well within my rights to say they jacked up Hades in that shot. Like, the full body shot, really. I think the close of his face is fine, but that full body shot looks whack. And of course, we get to see that Hades notices, like, oh, so you feel the pain of others? That's not that heat. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's kind of an unfortunate blight. And of course, I almost called him Shiyo. Huang is like, come on now. It's precisely because I know the pain of others that I am the greatest king. And then the chapter ends. So essentially, that was it. Man, I was talking for so long, but that was a beautiful chapter. I'm not gonna lie to you. That hit me right in the feels, and if only for the fact that it was a predictable story told well. Like that was a story that I knew was gonna end. I knew how it was gonna end from the moment Chunyan was introduced. However, it was told so well. I felt so bad for Huang, and seeing everything just recontextualizes and gives more context to the man we know today. And if he loses, this is going to be a more massive L. Like, if he loses, this is going to be a more massive L than Heracles. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. Remember how Heracles was supposed to be the true savior, the one to really stick it to humanity? Yeah, when he lost, that was a major L for the gods. This would be the most massive, gargantuan, I mean more than Adam versus Zeus. Like, this would be the ultimate L for humanity if this man loses right here, right now. Because I'm invested. I'm invested way more than, I'll admit. I'm invested even more than I was in Buddha versus Hajun/Zero. Because despite me being hyped for that fight and just like a combat sense, because obviously both sides were not the biggest fans of each other, at least in terms of sheer character, I don't think I've been this invested in like one of the humans. Because this is like the only time we've gotten to see him young, him in a middle stage of his life, and we see him now. So this is honestly the most deeply invested. Is he my favorite? I'll determine that after he wins or loses. But at the moment, he's definitely up there. Huang is amazing, and I love the lengths that the mangaka went to be like, hey, you gonna like this character whether you like it or not. Now, once again, your local Hades stan, begging for a piece of change on the side of the road. Please give this man something comparable. I know this fight isn't like the most grand. It doesn't have the most like crazy environments. These two are literally just physical fighters with the occasional air blast here or there. They aren't your weapon transforming thousands upon thousands of spears. Like, they aren't monsters in the sense of what they can do physically. So I can see where the author's going. So please, please, please give me an emotional edge for Hades. Give me a reason to want him to win too, because I think that's the important part. I want balance, as all things should be. So, other than that, this is a 10 out of 10 chapter. The only issue I have, I will admit, is the slight inconsistency with Hoang's powers towards the end. But obviously, you got to tell a narrative, so fine. Break some rules, structure some rules, do what you need to do. So overall, 10 out of 10 for me. However, those are my thoughts on the chapter. Please tell me your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, do have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 a month. Any support would be appreciated. Now, thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.